25-30, 35-40, 45-50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. Oh, no, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Well, it is Friday here in the SEC Block Party presented by Underdog Fantasy, and we have brought in a man who knows how to crack a few cold ones, who could probably put some grills on the steak, have a wonderful afternoon watching some SEC football. Mr. Lance Barton from Always Talkin' Ball. Lance, glad to have you here on the show. This is right up your alley, my friend. I'm excited to see you take flight here tonight.
Absolutely, man. And I think you just described me pretty perfectly there. A nice cold beer with some food off the grill and some college football and about 3 TVs on a college football Saturday, and talking some SEC ball with the boys here. Appreciate you guys having me on. I'm obviously excited to talk about the conference where it really does just mean more. I mean, we know that. Come on.
That's right. It is contenders here for the SEC. Over the last week, we've broken down the storylines. Trey, you talked with Chris Lee of Southeastern 16 on Monday. We really got the block party ramped up as we talked about 10 teams in the SEC that could be bowl hopefuls, could be dark horses, likely somewhere in between with the depth of this conference. And now, Lance, we turn to the top 6 teams as voted on by the Jimmies and the Joes, and we'll break those teams down in order. But before we got there, you don't just necessarily dive into the steak or the hot dogs or the hamburgers. Typically, you're going to go get some chips, some dips, some sort of appetizer. So to kick off today's episode, what do you think the top storyline or question in your mind is going into the 2025 SEC season?
I think the top storyline is that, I mean, really over the past several years, going into the season, it seemed like that it was either Georgia or Alabama. Most years going into the season in the SEC. And that does not seem to be the case anymore. While those 2 teams are absolutely among the teams that are going to be competing, that most people think will be competing for an SEC championship and competing at a national championship level. But some of these teams I know that we're going to talk about today absolutely can throw their name in the hat as a team that is a true contender to compete for a chance to get to the SEC championship, especially with these larger conferences now adding Texas and Oklahoma. Like, not all schedules are being created equal anymore. So there's more teams that have a chance to actually get to Atlanta. And so I think there's more teams that can actually, more fan bases going into the season that feel like they have hope to win an SEC title and make it to Atlanta. And then the other one is, I mean, it's hard not to say this, but like the quarterback position in general, I think, that's obviously a very polarizing position. But that position in general this year, I mean, you've got some of your top contenders that have very talented but unproven quarterbacks. And that's really that way across college football. And then you've got the elder statesmen like Nuss at LSU and some of your more like kind of veteran guys that are proven. But, I mean, the name that kind of seems to be dominating a lot of the headlines, what's Arch Manning going to be like? Is he going to live up to the hype at Texas, or is he I mean, I feel like he's got to be borderline great, elite, for him to be able to live up to the hype. But I think he's obviously a huge storyline as well. I think that's probably the bigger storyline. I kind of gave you more than one there, but I think that's kind of your bigger storylines going into this SEC season.
Hey, that's all right. We've got the banquet style plates at this block party. Just load the plate up, man. As much as you can fit in one serving, let's go. And we know we're coming back. You mentioned Arch. That's going to be one of those servings that we come back to the table for as we get to Texas. I've been so impressed as SEC Media Days have gone on this week. Just the poise, the maturity that he's shown talking to the media. I mean, he's had an absolute gaggle. I think that's probably the best word for it, of assorted media around him. and he's handled it like a champ. He's been very down to earth. You can tell that he has been raised the right way by his parents, his grandparents. They have groomed him for this moment, not in a Hollywood superstar kind of way, but hey, this is how you handle success, and this is how you do things the right way. So I'm very excited to see Arch this season. We'll talk about the Texas Longhorns coming up. But Trey, I'm actually going to kick it to you here. And one of the questions as we discuss quarterback play starts, I think, with the South Carolina Gamecocks, who is comes in at number 6 in our contender ranking here this evening. And Lenora Sellers had a tremendous end to 2024. He put it all together, his mobility, the arm, the decision-making, and gosh darn it, it's really hard to bring him down in the open field. But there's a lot of questions maybe with the support around him this year. And South Carolina is certainly going to be a trendy championship pick or a college football playoff pick, maybe even a dark horse to get to Atlanta. But I wonder what your sentiment is on the Gamecocks as they replace his weapons. They've got to figure out the running game around Lenora Sellers. Like, where do you slot South Carolina in as we start tonight's episode?
I think this tier at the bottom of the contenders is about where they should be because they proved that they have the most important position on the field figured out. They've got a quarterback. They've got Lenora Sellers, who's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in college football. You mentioned the run game. Rocket Sanders gone, obviously, but I love Rashal Faison from Utah State. I think that was a fantastic pickup in the portal. They need a wide receiver to step up. We've been waiting for a couple years for guys like Nick Harbor and Mazio Bennett to figure it out and kind of put the talent, translate the talent that they naturally have to actual production on the field. I think the offense is going to be okay, though. I think that they'll figure it out. They will have a great run game. I think they'll do just enough in the passing game to figure it out and put some points on the board. Where I'm really worried, guys, is the defense, because more so than Lenora Sellers last year, I think the identity of that South Carolina team was that front seven. They were just nasty, got up in your face, were making plays in the backfield left and right. They lost 9 guys on the defense to the NFL, 5 draft picks and 4 undrafted free agent signings. That's unheard of outside of places like Athens, Georgia, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and Columbus, Ohio. So for me, that's the biggest question. How can they replace all that production? Bill Connolly has them at 46% returning production. They didn't exactly bring a ton of guys in from the portal that have starting experience. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they can transition to this year and replace all that talent that they lost.
Yeah, Lance, it feels like it's an age-old story when it comes to the SEC, where we're constantly bringing in a bunch of new talent, tremendous new faces every season, but it takes a special coach, it takes a special program to put all of that together. Obviously, on the defensive line, you've got a guy, an all-star in Dylan Stewart, who's going to be screaming off the edge, right? But your defense is much more than just edge pressure by itself. They've got some returners in the secondary. I guess my next question for you is, what do you think about Shane Beamer? How have you evaluated him over these last couple of years? We've seen some real flashes, and last year was certainly one of them. But with so much turnover heading towards the Gamecocks for this season, really, it's been a few coaches that you can kind of count on one hand, right, in the league in recent history that have been able to weather those storms and still churn out a championship performance. Talk to me about your temperature on the Gamecocks.
Yeah, I have to agree there with Trey on the defensive side of the ball, like the defensive front, like South Carolina. Like, we know that Georgia, Alabama, and some of those teams have just next man up when they lose the type of talent that South Carolina just lost. We're going to find out how good that Shane Beamer and this coaching staff is, and defensive coordinator Clayton White, how good they are at talent acquisition and developing that talent. That is really going to be tested on the defensive side of the ball this year. I mean, they were top 5 in the SEC last year in tackles for a loss and sacks and interceptions and things that are really game-changing type plays on the defensive side of the ball. They were that good on that side. So, I mean, I agree too. The offense, I'm not worried about that. I mean, Sellers is the type of player, maybe more so than anybody else in college football, that can truly take a team and put them on his back and take over a game. at the end of the day, the defense isn't working. This is not working. It's kind of like the Mariano Rivera, the old cutter. Just throw the cutter every time until they hit it. I mean, we can talk about all this with the defense and that they may not have the weapons on the receiver and things like that, but Sellers can take over a game himself. But if South Carolina wants to be able to make the college football playoff and be a 10-2 type team, they're going to have to maybe not necessarily be as great as they were defensively last year, but they definitely need to find some guys that can put up some type of production and, take place of some of the production that they lost.
Yeah, 12th in scoring defense a season ago, 16th in total defense. There's no doubt that Beamer's boys pitched a lot of really complete games on the defensive side. Offensive line, they return a couple of tackles. They're a little bit young in the interior, though. I do wonder about their ability to establish that running game to help Lenoris Sellers maybe balance out the offense a little bit. But Lance, you're right. I mean, gosh, no team, no fan base saw what Lenoris could do better than the Texas A&M Aggies when Lenoris, it felt like, broke every single one of the 28 missed tackles that the Aggies had that night in Columbia. It was as frustrating a watch as I think Trey and I have sat through. And that's saying something. We've sat through a number of just mind-numbing losses by our team, but Lenoris does feel like he could be the next special quarterback in the SEC, right? I mean, you heard on SEC Media Days, Cam Newton comparisons, Tim Tebow comparisons, right? From a toughness, from a physicality standpoint, and now it really seems like from a leadership standpoint as well, Norris is kind of ascended to that next level. So a very easy guy to root for. I think an easy program to root for, assuming you're not, a Clemson fan. But what worries me or concerns me is I think South Carolina could take some nice steps offensively. I think they could mature as a team. I think the defense could be good to above average, maybe taking a step back from last year, but still serviceable in getting South Carolina to that next level. What concerns me, though, is the schedule. The schedule is they don't miss many challengers in the SEC, right? And specifically on the road this year at Missouri, at LSU, at Ole Miss, at Texas A&M. You flip it around to the home schedule. Sure, they open with Vanderbilt and Kentucky, who you assume they'll take care of. But then it's Oklahoma, it's Alabama, it's Clemson at the very end of the schedule. They didn't get in at 9-3 last year, and that was a hotly debated topic. But I have to admit, as much as I think I'm eating some crow on Shane Beamer as a coach and starting to buy some stock in the overall longevity of this program, I'm having a hard time saying that they're going to the playoff this year.
Well, and it's not just the teams they do play, it's when they play them as well, because all those teams you mentioned, they're backloaded at the end of the year. The first 5 games are pretty manageable. I wouldn't be shocked at all if South Carolina's sitting there at 5-0 after the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season. But the last 7 games, they have a 4-game stretch where they go at LSU, host Oklahoma, host Alabama, and then go to Ole Miss. They finally have a bye week, which is just merciful at that point. And then at A&M, hosting Coastal Carolina and hosting Clemson. 6 of their last 7 could legitimately be against top 25 teams. And that's just brutal sequencing. If they find a way to 9-3, they're going to be right there on the bubble. And I think maybe getting the benefit of the doubt with all the clamoring with strength of schedule this offseason. So finding a way to 9-3 would be awesome. I struggle to see that path with the sequence that they have at the end of the year, though. I'm seeing this more kind of on the 7-5, 8-4 line.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. 8-4 was something that I was kind of flirting with myself on them. And you think too, last year, I mean, Williams-Brice is obviously a very tough place to play, but they lost even 2 home games last year. When they lost to LSU, I know some people can say that was a bad call that ended up costing them that game, but they lost that game. They got boat raced by Ole Miss at home. So if they don't hold serve at home, going to places like Baton Rouge, going to College Station, having the road games like that you were just alluding to, that's going to be tough to get to that 10-2 or possibly 9-3 to even be considered for a playoff spot.
I've got them at 8-4 this season as well, and I think as much as that would be disappointing for the folks that are fueling the playoff bandwagon right now, I think it's how you win and lose those games that determine how you roll into 2026, right? I mean, gosh, more than ever, this game and program building turns on a dime, and you have one bad season and you lose all the momentum. I think a coach that has the buy-in like Beamer and has objectively given this program a facelift, right? I mean, they were down and out for a number of years, just never really, considered to be at the top echelon of college football over these last several most recent seasons. He's put them right back in that conversation, and now they're recruiting well, and they're bringing in, maybe not a lot of talent from the transfer portal, but they're certainly picking and choosing at various spots. And like I said, I've done a little bit of a heel turn on Beamer, and at one point I thought it was maybe a house of cards that he was building. I think there's a nice foundation that he's building in Columbia. So South Carolina will be an interesting watch this season. There's no doubt about that. Lenora Sellers, can he get into Heisman discussion? That will be a fun storyline as well. Speaking of Heisman discussion, let's move to the Florida Gators next, where DJ Lagway took college football by storm last season, and obviously he was put into the role of starter at Florida. It felt like partly to save Billy Napier's job because his ceiling was objectively higher than Graham Mertz's, but also then Graham Mertz goes down with a season-ending injury, and Lagway's thrust into the spotlight. No matter kind of what the outcome was going to be. They go 8-5, and guys, this was a Florida team that in the preseason everybody had left for dead. I mean, the schedule was objectively gross. You couldn't have made a harder schedule in the college football video game if you had tried. And we all had Billy Napier getting fired maybe in the first 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, after the loss to Texas A&M at home, where they were just out physicaled up and down the field, we were on flight tracker duty, right? I mean, we were trying to figure out who on earth was going to be the next head coach in the Swamp. And lo and behold, Napier not only saves his job, but turns the ship around to where now Florida is 5th in our contenders ranking in arguably the deepest conference in America. They've got playoff hype. DJ Lagway has Heisman hype. Lance, make sense of all of this from me. Like, how impressed are you to see where Florida was and maybe now where they are? Are you buying the hype? Are you selling some of it? Where's your leaning on the Florida Gators?
I'm absolutely buying the hype. I think that Florida is one of the 10 to 15 best teams in the country now. What does that mean as far as their schedule is concerned? I know we'll get to their schedule more here in a minute, but the talent acquisition and the roster that Napier has built, he's really, dude, I really respect the fact that Napier has really just blocked out the noise from the outside world, stayed to his process. I mean, you've heard guys like Josh Payton and others that have been there to interview, that have interviewed Napier, and you'd say that you would never know that this team was struggling beforehand and had the record that they had beforehand when they went there last year. And that culture that he built there really shined through there halfway through the season. And obviously the emergence of DJ Lagway, the emergence of Jaden Ball. I mean, dude, that might be the most freakish backfield in the entire country at 6'4", 240-pound Lagway and 6'1", 235 running back and Jaden Ball. Both of them have great feet, obviously. Lagway, too, played last year with a little bit of a hurt shoulder, a hurt hamstring. And what is he going to be like when he's 100% healthy? And I know a lot of people acted like that Ole Miss game last year when they went into the Swamp. I'm going to say the casuals acted like that was a bad loss as far as Ole Miss not being able to get into the playoff. But they acted like, oh, they lost to that 7-win Florida team, whatever. Dude, there wasn't a coach. I can promise you could poll coaches around the country. And if there's certain teams that they'd say that they absolutely want no part of on the road at their place on that given Saturday, that Florida bunch at the end of the year in the Swamp, when LSU went there and when Ole Miss went there, that Gator bunch was a problem. And a lot of those guys are returning. They've added more weapons overall for Lagway around them, and 5-star Dallas Wilson. I mean, dude, I'm definitely buying this Florida hype and drinking the Gatorade with this bunch. And it's just, a lot of people keep pointing to their schedule, and I keep using Tyler on our show. He says this a lot too. Those teams that everybody's talking about that Florida has to play that's really tough, those teams also have to deal with this Florida bunch too. the reason that their schedule is tougher, the reason that someone like Texas has a tougher schedule this year is they have to go to the swamp and deal with this Florida bunch. So yeah, I'm definitely buying the hype.
I think all of that is extremely astute, right? When Florida beat LSU at home last year, I felt like kind of what you said about the casuals when Florida beat Ole Miss. I was more, oh man, well that's just Brian Kelly, right? Like that's kind of just what he does. This LSU team, like, yeah, they were due for one of these. They escaped South Carolina. There's Brian Kelly's head scratching loss. But then as that game marinated and we got to our preview before the Ole Miss week, I can't remember how many of us picked Florida to beat Ole Miss, but I think it was a pretty uniform discussion that, you know what, like we picked Tennessee to lose to Florida in the swamp 2 years ago. This feels very similar where a playoff dream is going to die. And you're right, Florida stood up to the test and they do that at home supremely well. Trey, they get their entire offensive line back. Listening to SEC Media Days today, the players, the coaches, the media, everybody is so excited to watch Florida play in the trenches, which is a dangerous place to start when you're talking about a championship contending team. The offensive line blocking in front of Jaden Baugh, who's not going to dance around you, mind you. Like Lance said, 6'1", 230 plus pounds. That guy's running through your face. You've got 4 or 5 starters back on the offensive line. You have a very talented wide receiving core. Eugene Wilson III is back. They bring in J. Michael Sturdivant from UCLA. And then Lance mentioned the true freshman 5-star Dallas Wilson. It's kind of a who's who catching the ball for DJ Lagway. I'm excited to see how that relationship develops throughout the year. But then you flip it around on the defensive line as well. And they were talking to Caleb Banks, defensive tackle for the Gators. And he said going against this offensive line every day in practice, they will break down their moves with each other afterwards. Hey, you ran this stunt. How did you guys go about preparing and communicating to block this as you recognize something at the line of scrimmage and vice versa? That tight-knit group in the locker room, that's when it gets to late October and early November and the bullets are flying and you've got to go on the road or you host a Texas or a Tennessee at home, that's what you need to lean on in order to win these big games.
Yeah, absolutely. And they really found their identity last year on that defensive line. 19 sacks in the last 3 games, that 3-game win streak against Florida, LSU, Ole Miss, and Florida State. The defense, we never questioned the talent, right? But at the beginning of the year last year, they were really struggling to find what they were good at, the identity they wanted to have. Were they a pass rushing team? Were they just stop the run with numbers team? They were really struggling to find that. And in that last 4-game streak to end the year, they only gave up 13 points per game. So something clicked, something changed. It was 30.1 the rest of the year against Power 4 competition. So something's clicked, something's changed. You mentioned Caleb Banks, who's probably going to be a top 15 pick in the NFL draft next year. The edges are really scary as well. Tariq Sapp and George Gums combined for 12 sacks last year. So it's going to be an athletic, freakishly talented defensive line. The linebacker core and the secondary return a bunch of talent from last year as well. It feels like a Florida team on the defensive side of the ball like we used to see under previous coaches like Urban Meyer. It's just athletes everywhere that are going to make freakish plays all over the field, and you're just going to be left wondering how to move the ball against them at times this year. They got to find the consistency. They got to make sure that they show up with the same intensity they did at the end of the year last year from the word go. But if they can do that, it's going to be a defense nobody wants to face all year long.
Yeah, and like Trey, you guys are hitting the nail on the head. We know that to win in this league, to win in the SEC, you have to be really, really good along the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And Florida allowed on the offensive side last year, they allowed 19 less sacks in 2024 than they allowed in 2023. And they're returning, like you said, 4 of those 5 guys. And then you mentioned the numbers there, the 19 sacks in their last 4 games. They had 38 tackles for a lot. They were just living behind the line of scrimmage and forcing negative plays and forcing drive-killing type plays along that defensive front. And I heard them mention him at SEC Media Days, and like obviously Tyreek Sapp and Caleb Banks get all the pub, and they should, as good as those 2 guys are. We talk about the talent acquisition at Florida. LJ McCray was the nation's top defensive line recruit last year coming out of high school, and he played quite a bit last year. He was the number 3 overall recruit. So that's a guy that's going to be in his second year in the SEC, getting bigger, stronger, learning the defensive line position, learning his position even more and better technique. The line of scrimmage on both sides. I know that Lagway and Ball get all the pub, but the line of scrimmage play on both sides of the ball is going to be nasty for this Gator bunch.
And we don't think Lagway is going to get randomly subbed out this year, right? We don't think we're going to do that again.
It's strange, not. Man. Hope not. Better not.
Better not. Golly, the amount of times that it's like, okay, I feel like Florida might. They didn't score, but there were some positive signs. And here comes Graham Mertz again. I guess we're gonna do this all season long.
Yeah.
Talk to me about their schedule, guys. It ramps up pretty quickly. There's not much of a carpool lane here to get us into the season, right? You get your warm up against Long Island, but then South Florida, who is as talented as they've maybe ever been. Certainly expect Florida to win that game, but Alex Golesh has some dudes on that team. At LSU, at Miami, Texas, and at Texas A&M to finish the first half. It is a murderer's row once again. So start with this. What do you expect their record to be through the first 6 games? And kind of give me the state of the union based off of that.
I think if they're 4-2, like they could be better, but I think if they're 4-2 after that stretch, because I do think that if Florida and Oklahoma, more than anybody else in the entire country, going into the season, of anybody that's like remotely a contender to make the playoffs, if Florida were to go 9-3, they absolutely should be considered for the college football playoff. With the schedule that they're playing, it's just ridiculous. So if they can be 4-2 after this stretch, after those first 6 games, with games at LSU, at Miami, at Texas A&M, and then Texas at home, I think that they've got a real shot to finish the season like 9-3 or possibly even better, to be a team that can make the college football playoff.
Yeah, you want to at least split those 4 games. And I think that's a very attainable goal. When you look at the home road splits this year, I think the schedule's obviously the teams that they're playing are the same as last year, but I like the home road splits better this year than they were last year. Going to Miami doesn't really scare me as a road environment. That's going to be a talented team, but there's probably going to be more Gator fans in that stadium than Miami Hurricane fans. Going to LSU is obviously going to be difficult, and it's already slated as a night game too. So, if the defensive line though is cooking, and we'll talk about LSU next with their offensive line and the transition that they're going to have, that could be an opportunity to really muddle up that game in week 3. But yeah, I think splitting those 2 would really give you a firm foundation, and finding a way to split the Texas teams as well would give you a really firm foundation for the rest of the year. Then you're playing Georgia and Jacksonville. You go to an Ole Miss team that I'm not personally really sure what we're going to get out of Ole Miss this year, and then host a Tennessee team that is living post-Nico life. So there's a real opportunity to build some momentum at the end of the schedule if you can just find a way to split those first 4.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing, too. I think their bye weeks come at perfect times, too. Like, after that stretch where they have to go to LSU and to Miami, they get that bye week before they play Texas. And then they get their bye week, of course, that they have every year before they play in the cocktail party against the Dogs. I think those are very opportunistic bye weeks for them.
Yeah, no doubt. It gives them a chance to kind of recenter, rest, recover. We know there's going to be attrition this year, and get ready to play 2 absolutely pivotal games in their schedule. If they can get the mojo flowing in that first half, outside of Georgia, I'm not sure who stops them in that second half of the season. And that's when you could see Florida kind of rise back to prominence and make a run at the college football playoff. Florida Gators are a team that I'm both excited to watch and nervous that they're on our team's schedule as well. But, that's just part of the fun of playing in the SEC. Trey, you talked about the LSU Tigers being up next, and Garrett Nussmeier waited his turn. He has been in Baton Rouge for his entire career, and now he's a Heisman favorite. He's one of those guys that you look at in a conference, really in a sport, where quarterbacks change like the laundry. Garrett Nussmeier is one of the gray heads at this point, the veterans who's been there for a long time. He understands the system. This is Garrett Nussmeier's team. And now he leads LSU into what feels like a pivotal season, guys, where they've just kind of perennially underachieved under Brian Kelly. They made it to the SEC championship game in that first year and did not go well. Since then, it's just kind of been one inopportune slip up after another. USC, the season openers, man. I mean, they continue to elude Brian Kelly and the Bayou Bengals. The loss to Texas A&M, where they just blew a 3-score lead to a shifty quarterback that, frankly, they hadn't game planned for. It's those kind of mistakes that have given Brian Kelly, I think, a reputation that is fun to pick on Twitter, but given the talent on the team, it feels like eventually he's going to shut all the doubters up. And if he's going to do it, it feels like it might be this year with Garrett Nussmeier, with Caden Durham, with Aaron Anderson. The offense is loaded. A lot of talent on the defense, Lance, and maybe that's where you want to start, but there are going to be some new starters, some new faces as Brian Kelly embarks on a new chapter.
Yeah, I think this LSU bunch is going to be able to play a lot more complementary football this year. I think that's been a huge problem for them since Brian Kelly's been there, especially the last couple of years. They haven't been able to run the football from the running back position on offense. Defensively, 2 years ago, they were absolutely booty. And then last year, they were a little bit better. They improved underneath, first year underneath Blake Baker. Absolutely. But they're not still at the championship level that they like to be at. And I think they know that. But it's just strange, man, seeing LSU these past couple of years not having just dudes all over the field like that we're used to seeing with them on both sides of the ball, especially on defense. But, I mean, the talent's there. Harold Perkins Jr. obviously is extremely talented. We saw what he was as a freshman. Can he get back to that this year? Coming off an injury, Whit Weeks coming off an injury. That's a great place to start for sure at the linebacker position there for them. I mean, Whit Weeks was a tackling machine last year. I think we know what we're going to get from him. I don't think he's going to be definitely not any worse. I don't think we're going to have to worry about any slump from him. I think this is what he is. He's a tackling machine. But the additions of Jack Pyburn and Patrick Payton through the transfer portal, coming off the edge on the defensive end position, getting pressure on the quarterback, having those two guys, Payton 2 years ago, when Florida State just had a who's who along that defensive line, that team that went undefeated in the regular season for the Noles. Patrick Payton was one of their better pass rushers for that team. And they had two guys on that defensive line that are already wreaking havoc in the NFL right now. And so I do think that LSU is going to be better defensively this year, second year with Blake Baker as DC. Will they be dominant? I don't know that they'll be that, but I don't think they have to be that with how good that this offense is going to be. They just need to be able to get stops, keep people out of the end zone, make people kick field goals, and get the dang ball back to Nuss in that offense.
Yeah, the secondary for me is where I look at LSU probably needing to continue to take the biggest jump. Lance, you mentioned 2 years ago, they were dreadful to watch.
Mm-hmm.
LSU couldn't stop a nosebleed in the secondary. And they've continued to improve that. They've got Ashton Stamps back at cornerback. AJ Halsey, a stud safety, comes over from Houston. That was devastating to me in my Cougars stock early on this spring. So it feels like LSU continues to take those steps to improve the secondary. Blake Baker is obviously a genius on that side of the ball. He knows what he's doing. Trey, you look at the defensive line then, and it's like it's all names that, first of all, we're familiar with from lost recruiting battles. But it's also a lot of maybe unproven talent when it comes to the youth. So I'm talking about supremely talented defensive tackle Dominic McKinley. I'm talking about Gabriel Relaford off the edge. Lance mentioned some of those pieces that they went and got in the portal in Payton and Pyburn, but there is a reliance on some youth that maybe we haven't seen from a championship caliber LSU team in a while.
Yeah, and I think at this point, we just have to trust Blake Baker that he knows what he's doing, right? Like, he has the talented chess pieces. Lance, you mentioned how booty they were 2 years ago before Blake Baker got there. They were 108th in total defense in 2023. Yep. They got all the way up to 61st last year. So obviously still well below LSU standards when you think about from a historical perspective and what we expect from that program. But Blake Baker absolutely knows what he's doing. He's one of the best defensive coordinators in the game. Had Missouri absolutely humming when he was there. And there's a reason LSU made him the highest paid coordinator in college football when he got there. So, yeah, it's going to be a reliance on youth up front. I think they have more than enough talent in the rest of that front seven, the linebacker core, like Lance mentioned. I love the secondary. There's talent everywhere. So it's just getting them in the right places. And honestly, like we've been saying for a couple of years, this is more of a linebacker thought than a defensive line thought. But how many times on this show, Mitch, have we questioned what are they doing with Harold Perkins? Why are we not just letting him do what he's obviously best at? As a freshman, he just went in there with his hair on fire, rushed the quarterback, and was the best player on the field as a freshman. And then we want to make him a pass covering guy or a stay in the box and defend the run guy. Make your guys allow your guys to do what they do best, put them in the right position. And Perkins got hurt last year, was dealing with a lot of injuries, so he didn't really get a chance to do that under Blake Baker, but I think I trust him to do that more so than some of the guys they've had on that coaching staff in the past.
Yeah, moved back to the star position for this season, which I think college football fans, not just LSU fans, but college football fans rejoice that we get to see Perk being supremely athletic. I mean, gosh, all they had to do is look elsewhere in the conference to see what Texas did with Anthony Hill as a freshman. Just turned him loose, said, you're not ready to play inside linebacker for us yet, but you know what you can do? You can go get the pass rusher or go get the quarterback. And he did that against Alabama. Immediate results for Anthony Hill. Colin Simmons this last year off the edge. Same deal. Like, okay, there's a lot you got to learn as far as actually being a technician here, but gosh, you can go harass that quarterback like the best of them. And he made an impact in year one and led Texas all the way to that semifinal appearance. So I think at a certain point, it's kind of like Little League, right? You just got to let the best athlete be the best athlete and put the rest of the pieces together around him. I think we're going to see some of that from Harold Perkins again this year. And yeah, certainly hoping that he can stay healthy. The offensive line is maybe the question mark on the other side of the ball, where you're replacing both tackles, both guys gone to the NFL. And Lance, you mentioned earlier, LSU has struggled to run the football consistently. I think they've got their guy, right, in Caden Durham, a Duncanville boy who I got to watch win a couple of state championships. That dude is an absolute fridge. Good luck trying to tackle him, and he's hell on wheels in space as well. But if the offensive line struggles to gel early, that could spell disaster for an LSU offense that objectively is going to need to put it together quickly against teams like Clemson, against Florida. They've got at Ole Miss and South Carolina all in the first half of the season.
Yeah, dude. Breaking in a new offensive line. Again, some of these guys have played, like the center that they brought in from Virginia Tech and Braylon Moore, and the all Big Ten guard and Josh Thompson from Northwestern. I mean, those guys have played ball, but when you have a new unit that's playing together and their first game ever is going to be trying to deal with communication at Clemson at night on your opening game of the year, good luck. But I mean, last year for LSU's offensive line last year, I was reading Pick Six previews this past week. It came out. Brett Ciancia does a great job there. Fantastic preview magazine. I was reading, talking about how awful LSU's offensive line was with their push on the run game, and how they were just really below average last year as far as like run blocking, but they were one of the best in the country in pass blocking for Nuss. So I'm wondering if this offensive line can get more of a push and help this run game, because again, I just think that overall offense, defense, like on offense, the run game and the pass game, I think LSU has a chance to be more balanced and play better complementary football this year. And it's not just Caden Durham. Caleb Jackson, he's a load too. And we've seen true freshmen the last several years, especially the last few years, at certain position groups where true freshmen come in and can make a huge impact right out of the gate. And Harlan Berry, former 5-star, #1 running back in the country out of Louisiana, I think you're going to see him get some carries probably early on because that's a position where it's just like, hey, here's the rock, take off, kid. Just go run. Like that's a position where you can do that. So I agree that there's got to be some question marks, obviously, when you lose some of the guys they lost on the offensive line, more so in the pass blocking game for Nuss, because obviously he's not as mobile as a Jaden Daniels was. But I think that the run game is going to be able to take some pressure off him.
Yeah. Switch to the schedule for me here to finish out our Bayou Bengals preview. I don't know if I'm rocking the boat here by saying I've got LSU going 9-3. I've got them losing to Clemson. I think they drop a home game, like maybe it's to a South Carolina, somebody of that ilk. And then I think I've got them losing on the road at Alabama later on this season, the second half of the schedule. 9-3 would hit the over. It might get them into the playoff, but it also feels like with Brian Kelly, the expectations from LSU Nation, it feels like anything less than, quite honestly, 10-2 might be deemed as a failure. Do I have that right?
I think you're right when you just think about the last 3 coaches at that program have won a national championship. So that is the standard at LSU. And Brian Kelly has, I guess, gotten them close. He's gotten them to Atlanta. He's gotten them in playoff contention later in the year, but hasn't been able to get over that hump. I look at the schedule and I see, as long as the offensive line is able to gel relatively quickly, I see this as a 10-2 team. I really, Clemson's going to be a toss-up. Brian Kelly and LSU have not won a season opener since 2019 when they won the national championship. That's just a hilarious stat that I love to throw out anytime that I can. But it's going to be a legitimate toss-up as they go into Death Valley. All of those games have been extremely close. When you think about playing Florida State on opening weekend, playing USC last year in Las Vegas, they're playing close games that are going down to the wire. And they're getting things turned around relatively quickly after those losses. After Clemson, I really don't see another team that they should lose to, in theory, until they play that game in Tuscaloosa. Mostly because the Florida and South Carolina games are at home. I'm going to lean towards LSU, and they're playing in Death Valley. And I like that. I like they play at Ole Miss, but like I've said a couple times in this preview series, I'm just not as high on Ole Miss this year. I think that they're going to take a step back. So the way their schedule sets up after Clemson, I think they do have some nice opportunities to build a resume at home and prepare for that big showdown against Alabama.
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards 10-2 right now myself. And honestly, when you look at this schedule, again, all the games you mentioned, this really could come down to on Saturday, November the 29th, last regular season game of the year, on the road in Norman at Oklahoma. Sure. And if that Oklahoma bunch can be as good as what a lot of people think they possibly can be with some of the pieces that they've added, that could be what decides Brian Kelly and LSU's playoff hopes that last regular season game of the year in Norman.
Golly, imagine with all the discussion about the expansion era and the 12-team playoff, and does it value the regular season? Does it devalue the regular season? Having a game like that where it's LSU and Oklahoma, maybe for a playoff spot on the line, that would be absolute cinema. So that's the storyline I'm rooting for.
Just think if Oklahoma 2 years in a row, if they were the ones that played the spoiler role at the very end of the year and they knocked Alabama out of the playoffs last year at the end of the year. And then if they're the team that happens to what we're talking about here, if they're the team that would knock LSU out of playoff contention as well this year.
Real quick, before we move on to the next team, would 9-3 put Brian Kelly on the hot seat in y'all's mind?
I think in Baton Rouge it would. I don't like with the fans on Twitter it would. I don't know that realistically it would be hard. It would be hard for Scott Woodward to move on from Kelly after a 9-3 year, especially if they're in playoff contention.
Yeah, and he's got a massive, massive buyout too. But I agree, the fans, they absolutely would be yelling from the bayou everywhere that they want him gone. But I agree. I'm not sure that they would get rid of him because, like, who you replace him with?
Sure.
Yeah. Scott Woodward gave a coach a massive buyout. I'm shocked.
Hey,
yeah, you guys know a little bit about that.
Greg McElroy did get called out by some Alabama insiders for some misinformation, but Nick Saban, evidently rumored to be back on the market.
Well, if there's a program that he would take, I think that would be on the table.
That's right. All right. From LSU to Austin, Texas, we go to the Texas Longhorns, where they come in ranked third in the Jimmy's and Joe's preview poll. Arch Manning has ascended to the throne in Austin, and it is his time to shine. We have covered his recruitment from back when he was in high school. We have covered him as a backup, the most covered backup probably in the history of this silly little sport. And now it's finally his turn on the 40 acres to lead the Texas Longhorns. And From a 30,000-foot view, this team continues to pass the eye test. Extremely talented. They're going to be big and physical. The weapons on the offense, I think, is a great place to start. The running back room has been so valuable for what the Longhorns have done over these last couple of years. Trey Wisner is back and healthy. CJ Baxter is back and healthy. They're going to have a loaded stable for Arch to lean on. The wide receivers are basically unfair, both from what they've recruited internally and what they go out and get from the transfer portal as well. It is just another treasure trove that Steve Sarkisian and company have to work with in Austin. Defensively, it's also extremely talented. They've got big bruisers on the defensive line. We've talked about Colin Simmons off the edge. Anthony Hill may be the best linebacker in the sport. Quarterbacking that defense should be a first-round draft pick after this season. And the secondary returns a lot of snaps, a lot of experience led by former walk-on Michael Taff. There's a lot of reasons to like the Texas Longhorns and even project them to be maybe the top team in the country, as so many have. I'll start with my first question about the Longhorns. And Lance, if you want to take this one, Texas is replacing so many snaps on the offensive line. Similar to LSU, it is a very different outlook from 2024 to 2025 when it comes to the bodies along that offensive line. And boy, Texas had a really good one last year.
Yeah.
How do you think the Longhorns go about replacing as much as they need to along the offensive line with a new quarterback in Arch Manning?
So I almost want to ask a question back to you on this that I thought was interesting, because nobody has been better. Kirby Smart in Georgia and Sark in Texas have been the best overall in talent acquisition the last 2 to 3 years, using like high school recruiting, obviously, but they've done a great job of supplementing through the transfer portal. Obviously, NIL and all that has been a huge factor to that. And they've supplemented in all of these positions of need, especially along the defensive line, the last 2 years through the transfer portal. They did not do that along the offensive line. So my question to you guys on that is that should that not raise almost like it raised my antennas of like, I think Sark and Kyle Flood, Sark, one of the best offensive minds in the country, and Kyle Flood, who's one of the best offensive line coaches in college football, with all the money that they've got in NIL and Lamborghini of Austin, they're not going out and buying offensive linemen to replace these guys, a bunch of guys to replace these guys. Like what that's kind of surprising to me. It tells me that they like what they've got on their roster.
And I think if you look at just the recruiting rankings out of high school, that they should like what they have on their roster. It's a bunch of 4- and 5-star guys. Some of them got in on some action last year while guys were missing either a whole game or missing time within the games with injuries at different points last year. So they've gotten to see some of these guys in game action too. But I think the only pushback I would have on that assertion is, one, that is the hardest position to get out of the transfer portal. An elite offensive lineman on the transfer portal does not absolutely grow on trees. And when they do pop up in the portal, they have everybody in the country going after them. So that would be my one pushback on that. And then also, I mentioned this with Chris Lee, you just don't know until they're thrown into the fire of an SEC schedule, or like, dude, they're going to play week 1. They play Ohio State week 1. So all these younger guys, I know I personally have seen at my school plenty of 4- and 5-star offensive linemen go up against 4- and 5-star defensive linemen that are a little bit more seasoned in the SEC and not win those battles until a couple years in. So I'm tapping the brakes just a little bit on the offensive line. Again, very, very talented. Don't question the talent evaluation at all, but you just have to see it before you fully believe it in the SEC.
Sure. Lance, they've got the Lamborghinis on defense off the edge. Are you concerned at all about the interior of that defensive line, where they did go out and get some guys in the portal, but we've been used to T'Vondre Sweat playing for the last couple of years, and I don't know that Sweat's replacement is just necessarily walking through the door, stopping for one season as a starter, and then heading to the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, they're really reliant on the dudes they picked up in the transfer portal. Well, they hit on Cole Brevard out of Purdue, who was all Big Ten honorable mention. Well, they hit on the defensive tackle Murad Watson, who was Syracuse last year in a 247 sports freshman All-American. Will they hit on guys like that? Are you asking me if I'm worried? To me, I mean, the interior of the defensive line and the offensive line, like we just alluded to, would be, if you're playing devil's advocate and you're wanting to give pushback against this Texas team, that would be where that I would give pushback against, because the edge rushers, the combination of edge rushers, inside linebacker, at least one corner and a safety, like, dude, they're as good as anybody in the country at those positions, at the combination of those positions. But I think that they've got the depth along the interior of the defensive line. They brought in, Justice Terry, one of the top, recruits in the country, that he'll probably see some time. But like, I'm not sure he's going to obviously start right out of the gate. That's kind of hard to come in as a true freshman in the SEC and start along the interior of the D line. But he's a guy, again, bodies, long season, that you could see maybe coming in and making some plays, being a situational third down guy. But yeah, there is a little bit of caution for me on that interior of the defensive line, because they're so reliant on hitting on these portal guys. Y'all know as well as I do on that. It's hit or miss. If you hit, you look great. Talent acquisition, everybody's like me is talking about how amazing your talent acquisition is. If you don't, then you could have problems in a hurry in this league if you're not great along the interior of the line of scrimmage.
Yeah. I'm sure some Texas fans that are tuning into this are going to say that I buried the lead, and maybe that's fair, but wanted to get in the rest of the team preview before I brought it back to Arch Manning, because everybody is talking about Arch. Still, when I look at their schedule, and you guys mentioned at Ohio State, out of the gate, right? At Florida versus Oklahoma to close out the first half of the regular season. They get some easier games on the road at Kentucky, at Mississippi State. They'll host Vanderbilt. But then it's a challenging finish as well at Georgia, Arkansas, Texas A&M, coming to the 40 acres. Give me your expectation for their record in terms of Arch Manning. What do you think he accomplishes this year? Does he go 12-0 and win the Heisman, like some have said? Or are there maybe some growing pains that we could expect from any other first-year starter?
Heisman's absolutely the ceiling. I don't think anybody questions that, because of the pedigree that he has and the talent that we've seen flashed on the field the first couple of years that he's been in Austin. But there also have been some growing pains. When he's come in at times, I'm thinking of the Georgia game in Austin last year when he came in for a couple drives, and really they tried to spark the offense. They tried to give him a chance to take over that job last year from Quinn Ewers, and he just wasn't ready. Now he's had a whole nother year of seasoning. And I think working with Sark and working with that staff is going to do wonders for him in being ready to go from week one this year. But we still haven't seen it in a full-time role. We've seen it a little bit when he's filled in, and the game plan's been a little bit more vanilla against teams like Mississippi State and some G5 schools when Quinn Ewers has been hurt. But we haven't seen him be the guy that the offense needs to count on. And Mitch, you did mention the wide receiver core, and I kind of feel the same way I do about the offensive line there. There's a lot of talented guys. I think DeAndre Moore and Ryan Wingo are absolutely amazingly talented recruits and young talent, but they also have to step up. And we're just assuming that a bunch of guys on the offense that have never had to be the guy are all going to step up and be the guy. And they absolutely might. But this was an offense last year that I don't think ever really hit their ceiling. I think that Texas fans would totally agree with that. They were probably really frustrated at times with how close those games were down the stretch. I talked with Chris Lee about that on Monday as well. And I've talked to many Longhorn fans face-to-face down here in Texas that don't understand why they're not blowing out a team like a Vanderbilt or a team like an Arkansas or a team like a Texas A&M when everything seemed to be going right. So I just want to tap the brakes a little bit. Are they going to be in the playoff? 95% yes. But I think just sharpening them in, especially when they have a schedule that includes Ohio State and Georgia, two teams that they went a combined 0-3 against last year with all those guys that we're talking about that are now in the NFL. What happens if they lose a third game? What happens if they stub their toe? What happens if Arch has a bad game because he's a first-year starter? At 9-3 Texas with the schedule is not getting into the playoffs. So I just want to caution everybody with that going into the year that not everything is sharpied in. Is it likely? Yes. Is it probably going to happen? Absolutely. Am I coping a little bit as a Texas A&M fan? Probably. But there is a world where 9-3 or worse happens because not everything just seamlessly integrates into the plan.
Lance, I feel like a lot of fans are going to feel like that's the terms and conditions that we just click past whenever we're, buying something new. So over to you. Agree, disagree?
No, I agree. I mean, the road games at Ohio State and at Florida and at Georgia, like there absolutely is a world with as good as we think this Florida team is, and obviously as good as Ohio State is, that they don't leave the month of September without 2 losses. That they're sitting there at 3-2. And could you imagine the pundits and the talking heads around what the narrative will be around Arch Manning at that time, and how quickly things could flip and what people would be saying about Sark at that time. If the long-awaited, start for Arch Manning, and they're not even out of September and they're 3-2. Now, obviously they could be 5-0 in that stretch as well. But I mean, I just think that I agree there is a world that Texas is 9-3. At this moment, as we sit here recording this, I'm more leaning towards their 10-2 team this year. And I am going to trust at this point until they give me a reason not to. Like, this isn't the previous Texas teams like pre-last 2 years where every year everybody hypes them up, them in Miami. Everybody would hype them up and Miami up every single year in the preseason. You could just pencil in death taxes in Texas and Miami going to be preseason ranked top 15 no matter what. And then that talent does not live up to the hype and they're not getting drafted high or whatever. The NFL draft last year showed that different, or this past April showed that different, and just the overall recruiting and what they're bringing in through the portal. I think too that Arch, his ability in the run game with his dual threat ability, Texas last year, Trey was alluding to, like, why were they able to blow out some of those teams? I really think a lot of it had to do with they could not stretch the field in the downfield passing game. And with some of these younger wide receivers that are burners, like, yes, they have to step up in a hurry to be able to do that. But I think the plan, absolutely. Like when Sark was at Alabama, his offenses were the best when they could run the rock and then play action off that and hit you over the top with a downfield passing game. And they just weren't able to do that with Ewers. Obviously, Arch has to go out and prove it.
Can't wait. Cannot wait to see what unfolds. I think the ceiling is quite high for Texas this year, and yet I find myself thinking they're really loading up for a run at the 2026 national championship. That's kind of where I fall on this. I think I'm of the mind 10-2, some growing pains this year, and then get ready to rock next season with a fully operational Death Star. All right, Lance, it is time to talk the Alabama Crimson Tide. I don't know if you need to, kind of shake it out. I don't know if you need another drink here, some fresh ice in your beverage. I'm just going to turn this over to you. Like, what gets you hot and bothered about the 2025 Alabama Crimson Tide?
Well, obviously, the addition of Ryan Grubb, having the continuity of the coaching staff that Alabama fans and everybody thought that I'm going to use the word that we were getting with when Kalen DeBoer was hired. Obviously, the longevity of the history of the Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Grubb have been together forever. And their success coincides with one another. It just does. And then, so Kalen DeBoer gets to Alabama, brings his boys with him over from Washington, and offensive line coach Scott Huff and Ryan Grubb in that group, and then they're gone, headed to the Seattle Seahawks. And then he has to try to figure that out, along with everybody picking off players off the roster in the transfer portal during that stupid 30-day rule. Yeah, you can tell how I feel about that. But what gets me excited about this bunch is I think that while Ty Simpson is unproven, I think a lot of people forget he's also a former 5-star, that he is one of these guys he's a former number 2 quarterback in the country coming out of high school. His dad is a football coach and coaches at the college level. So Like, I just think that he hasn't had it necessarily like between the years, I guess, like, throughout his career at Bama to be able to be the starter, be the leader of the team and take control of the locker room. Everything you hear is that he's doing that right now. But I think that he's a better fit for what this offense wants to be. Like Jalen Milroe was a square peg in a round hole. Going from, like, I tweeted this out from our Twitter all the time and stuff and asked people about this. Imagine being an offensive-minded coach that wants to have a downfield attack you down the field in the passing game, in the vertical passing game. Imagine going from Michael freaking Penix to Milroe. Again, Milroe's a great athlete, fantastic athlete. Not taking that away from him, but he wasn't the guy to run this offense. And
Lance, I was trying to beat that drum, I think, last March before the 2024 season. I was really concerned about that because you're absolutely right. They're just two diametric opposites at the quarterback position, and I'm really excited to see a more prototypical fit to this system this year.
Yeah, and like, again, with this offense, with Grubb and DeBoer, we saw what the wide receiver room and the passing game looked like at Washington. I mean, it was literally as good as anything we've seen 2 years in a row when they were there. And they had 6 wide receivers at Alabama this last year hit the transfer portal. Now, the casual will look at that and say, oh, we got a lot of people that don't want to be in Alabama's offense or they didn't want to be a part of Alabama. Nope. That was, we need to get our type of wide receivers in here. And they went out and got an Isaiah Horton from Miami, who's a bigger bodied X-type receiver like a Roma Dunze was at Washington. Go up and get the football and get the contested catches and go get the football down the field. Jalen Hale was a guy that came out of the state of Texas that was supposed to be the number 1 receiver for Alabama last year. And he got hurt before the year started. So the receiver core overall is deeper and is more of a better fit for this offense. The quarterback is more of a better fit for this offense. My question mark is, and it will be until they prove it to me, 2 years in a row, I had somebody sell me the worst used car ever, talking about how great this offensive line was going to be 2 years in a row and all of the trash talk from this offensive line. We're going to get back to playing joyless murder ball and stuff like the old Saban days. And dude, they just weren't that. They just weren't. And the inconsistencies from the offensive line, like you'd have games where against LSU, for example, and Death Valley last year, well, that they looked like an unstoppable force running the football with Milroe in that bunch. And then they go to Oklahoma and they look like they're scared of contact and they couldn't block me. It just, the inconsistencies of the offensive line, the inconsistencies, the feast or famine from Milroe last year. I think that this bunch and the hopes, as obviously as a fan, is that you're going to get more consistent play from the quarterback position. You're going to get more consistent play from the offensive line this year for this offense. We'll get to the defense in a minute, but that's just where I wanted to go more first for this, was start on the offensive side.
Trey, when we got to the offensive line there, did you feel the one of us meme pop up in your head? Because boy, you might have some Aggie to you there, Lance. I'll tell you what, if there's a fan base that buys used cars and hopes and dreams every single season, it's us. I certainly empathize with you there, but I agree. Like, there has been a physicality. There was a physicality last year that was missing from that Alabama team, and I think if you were looking for like the most recent crystallization of it, it was that bowl game against Michigan, where Michigan had no business coming in and winning. And, neither team probably wanted to be there. I get all of that. But then Michigan went out and just curb stomped Alabama, especially in the trenches on certain plays. It was like, oh, okay, one, where was this Michigan team all season long?
Yeah.
And two, like, does Alabama have a problem this offseason? Now, I think they've gone about it the right way. I think they've handled it. It feels like now we've kind of rebuilt some trust and confidence, and maybe that's some hopium on my end as well. But I do feel like Alabama has the right pieces in place, like you've described, to get back to, okay, this is Crimson Tide football. So flip it over to the defense. I look at this too deep, and I like what they have at linebacker. I really like what they have coming back in the secondary. And I mean, I think I like some of the pieces along the defensive line as well, like LT Overton. Like that guy could rack up 12 to 13 sacks in a heartbeat this season. Talk to me about where you are on the defensive side of the ball. Kane Womack in year 2. Are they doing anything for you? Do you expect kind of the Iron Curtain back in Tuscaloosa?
I do think that like last year down the back half of the year, that defense really improved as they learned. They call it vision coverage, and Kane Womack calls it the swarm defense. And I think that they got better down the back half of the year last year, starting to get more comfortable in this defense. And you hit the nail on the head with the secondary. I'm extremely comfortable with the secondary. They've got one of the best secondaries in the country, and they're very deep. Like they return. I know Malachi Moore is gone, but like Keon Sabb went down last year, was probably their best player in the secondary before he went down with an injury. He's back. But what happened with that is when Bray Hubbard came in and played for him, he ended up being a huge bright spot for that defense. So really, I don't think that that's losing a starter. No, Malachi Moore was good, but like having Bray Hubbard step in like he did and Keon Sabb there, I'm really bullish on the secondary. And they brought in a really good anytime you bring in a defensive player from Morgan Scalley's defense at Utah that played for Kyle Whittingham, I think that guy, I like what I know that I'm going to like what that guy's about. He's going to be about good stuff. He's going to be physical, probably very good and technical. Cam Calhoun, corner that they brought in from Utah, they said that he really stood out during the spring and is pretty much trying to make them give him some playing time. But if I have a position of caution, it's not the D-line. The D-line, I do like the D-line this year. I think they're deep. I don't know if they necessarily have some of the like just mega difference makers that they had in the past with like Jonathan Allen and people like that during the Saban years. But I think as a collective overall, as a group, I think they can be really good. Quay Rusall went down last year that played as a young guy for them. He went down with an injury earlier in the year. He was really jumping off the page early in the year as a guy that could be that next great one. His high school teammate, James Smith, both of them were 5 stars coming out of Carver Montgomery, coming out of high school. And James Smith down the stretch when Alabama's defense started getting better later in the year, he was one that was playing a lot along that interior of that defensive line and was a reason why that defense was getting better. But the inside linebacker position is a position that I'm a little nervous about because of the depth of it. Deontay Lawson had just about as nasty of a knee injury as you could have in that disaster game in Norman at Oklahoma last year. He's the captain of the defense. He's the green dot linebacker. He is one of the team leaders. It sounds like his rehab's going really well. He was at SEC Media Days this past week as well. And today sounds like he's going to be okay. But obviously you worry about that when you got a guy that's coming off such a massive knee injury. It wasn't like a slight little tear. It was huge that he had so late in the year. Justin Jefferson, who's kind of a veteran, is going to be playing alongside with him. But after that, it's young guys and a transfer that they brought in who was probably one of Colorado's best defenders. I know Colorado's not just elite on defense, but Nakai Hill-Green, when I saw they transferred in from Colorado, I'm not going to lie, I'm like, okay, we got a linebacker from Colorado. How good is this guy really going to be? But I looked into him immediately, and he originally went to Michigan and actually played some at Michigan as a freshman. And if Harbaugh and that bunch that Michigan, if they're recruiting you to come play defense there, obviously you can play. So I think they really like him, and they liked him when he was adding so far this offseason in the spring and whatnot. But the inside linebacker position is just a little bit of worry for me because of the depth.
I mean, I don't know that I have all that much to add other than those inside linebackers. Like, at the end of the day, the depth might be a little bit thin, but it feels like if the defensive line is doing what they're supposed to, that might be the one spot that you could perhaps get away with having kind of starters and maybe not much else proven behind them. Trey, I'll let you kick it off on the schedule. I don't know that there's many people that expect the Florida State game to be all that competitive. I have a hard time believing in Thomas Castellanos leading this Noles resurgence in game 1 over the Crimson Tide. They host Wisconsin in week 3, and then they open conference play with Georgia. So when you look at the entirety of the schedule, is there kind of a number that you gravitate towards?
I see 10-2 or 11-1, honestly, when I look at the schedule. That Georgia game on the road is going to be tough. Another one that's already been selected as a night game, but Tennessee, they get them at home. Tennessee hasn't won in Tuscaloosa since 2003. It's been quite a while since the Vols have had any success there. That South Carolina game, we picked it. We picked it on our college football road trip back in June when we did that episode, and I kind of stood on the table for it because they, to steal the line from Josh Pate, he's been very big on the Cocktober surprise. And that has kind of been the game that's been circled as the home game where South Carolina kind of ruins someone's season. But after that, you have an LSU team that, for all Alabama's faults last year, they just bulldozed in Baton Rouge and really derailed LSU's season. They have the Iron Bowl on the road, which is always difficult and definitely will come down to the wire and have something weird happen at the end since it's being played at Jordan-Hare.
Yep.
But I look at the schedule and I look at the depth on that defense, and I think more often than not, the Alabama defense is going to be the best unit on the field when they step onto the field against most of this schedule. They might have some arguments there against the Georgia defense or South Carolina's offense if it's really humming by October and not just completely beat up by that brutal stretch that we highlighted earlier. But defense is going to carry them a lot this year. And if Ty Simpson can learn that offense and fit well, like I think he can, I really don't see any reason why Alabama isn't one of the top seeds in the playoff this year.
Lance, I've got them at 11-1. I think if they can survive South Carolina, maybe that Georgia game is the only game that they drop. I know it's a little close to home, but what's your home or heart say?
Yeah, the South Carolina game is definitely one that scares me to death. I'm just going to be honest. As soon as I saw that on the schedule, where it was right after the Tennessee game, knowing to, like Trey alluded to, Cocktober. It just we've seen teams for years, especially the last few years, really good teams. We saw that Josh Heupel Tennessee team a few years ago go there and get just blasted out of nowhere. So that game definitely scares me. And dude, I'm going to really shock y'all with this. And y'all are probably going to respect me for this because the old battered Aggie syndrome, like that you talk about.
Yeah.
This is the fan of me is really going to come out here on this one. I might be the only person that because I guess I'm an Alabama fan on this, is that I'm a little worried, actually. Not worried like I think they're going to necessarily lose the game, but I'm a little worried about Florida State.
No.
And let me tell you why.
Please do.
Preparing for that team is going to be borderline impossible because new offensive coordinator Gus Malzahn, it's not going to be just his offense. Like him meshing his offense with Mike Norvell's offense. Like, what's that going to look like? Bringing in a Castellanos from, do I think he's like some of the I can't believe he said what he said. Like I just really can't. I don't know why you would do that. But I'm a little worried about that. And I'm big on the emotion part in college football, the back against the wall stuff. And Florida State is probably more so than any. I know every team that didn't have a great year last year, they're out to prove or whatever. But really, no team is out there more than anybody, maybe in all of college football, that has that back against the wall, try to prove it mentality. And no better way to do that than to have a game like that right out of the gate, that you have that script A, like Alabama, the team that kept you out of the college football playoff 2 years ago when you went undefeated, all those things. And you're going to Tallahassee with a new quarterback. It worries me a little bit. Am I saying that I think Alabama is going to lose to Florida State? I am not. I just don't think that's going to be an absolute boat race. Now, people that aren't fans of Alabama probably all think that. And I'm sure there are plenty of Alabama fans that think that as well. But yeah, at Georgia, at South Carolina, and yes, I'm saying it, at Auburn, because even Alabama fans can admit that is a house of absolute, a haunted house. When you go there, the voodoo magic, that goes on there. A&M saw that. You guys saw that in the last year, how that can turn into you saw that a couple years ago with Cadillac Carnell Williams when he was the coach, of that game. So I've got Alabama right now. If you gun to head made me pick it right now, I would say 10-2, 11-1. And obviously they've got the team that can get into the playoffs, the type of team on both sides of the ball, especially on defense, that can win a national championship. It's just going to come down to, can Ty Simpson run this Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer offense like I hope he can.
Lance, I don't mean to scare you even more, but the last time Ty Simpson started a game in the state of Florida, it was not fun for the Crimson Tide.
No, it wasn't. It was not. But actually, if I remember correctly, it was the what was his name? The Notre Dame Trent Buckner.
Tyler Buckner. Yeah.
Tyler Buckner. I think he was actually the one that started. And he was so good that he went to go play lacrosse after that. But Simpson did come in. Simpson did come in and play in that game and wasn't much better at all. One of the most head-scratching games I can remember as a fan, to be honest with you.
That truly was a what dimension are we in right now? Rainy.
You could barely see the field with the fog that was rolling in.
Yeah, not to go full on this like podcast here, but dude, I had people over here. You know how it is when you have a bunch of people that you're around trying to watch a game. Just 19,000 conversations going on. It's honestly like if I had my football watching hell. Like I want to sit there, just a couple of people, or just me and my wife, or whatever. 'Cause she watches ball too, and 3 TVs, and really be dialed into the game. Dude, I've got stuff on the grill. I've got people asking me to do this, do that, do this, do that. And honestly, I was okay with it because I was so freaking stressed out during all that. But yeah, man, I'm hoping that it doesn't go that way, and we're sitting there in the third quarter, and it's like 6-3. I don't think we're going to have to worry. I don't think we'll have to worry about that in this game with the Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Grubb, and Gus Malzahn coaching the offenses in that game.
I work with one of the doctors in our practice is a Crimson Tide grad, so I feel the stress, the success, the loss on that Monday. He comes into work on Monday, and tell you what, you can, even without watching a second of college football, if the Crimson Tide won or lost based on how he opens that door to start his day at the practice. So,
that's a real Alabama fan then, Mitch.
That's right. That's right. All right, let's try and keep this preview under 90 minutes long. This has been an absolute blast, but the Jimmies and the Joes have coronated the Georgia Bulldogs as the top team in the SEC heading into the 2025 season. And I'll be honest, I think a lot of this comes back to how much do you trust Kirby Smart? If you listen to the talking heads, there are certainly questions about the Georgia Bulldogs. They maybe haven't looked as dominating over the last couple of seasons since they were winning their national championships. But Kirby Smart always finds a way. He finds a way to build that recruiting class, to put that team on the field. For me, we look at Gunnar Stockton, who's obviously taken over at quarterback. First of all, I don't know if you guys saw him at Media Days. That man, I tweeted, looks like he's walked at least 2 daughters down the aisle already. That is the oldest 20-year-old that I've ever seen. But secondly, I'm wondering how this offensive line steps up. The offensive line was uncharacteristically inconsistent and not physical, kind of similar to what we were talking about with Alabama. When Notre Dame decided to put the chips down in that playoff game, Georgia's offensive line wanted no part of it, had no business stopping the Fighting Irish. For me, if they can take those steps forward, protect Gunnar Stockton, that's when I think Georgia starts to cook again. That's when I think the Bulldogs start to build back towards the Kirby Smart that we've grown accustomed to over these last couple of years. Defensively, it's very talented, a lot of talent. You know that between the hedges, they're going to be bringing in some of the best at every position. But Trey, as much confidence as the Jimmies and Joes have in Georgia, and some of the talking heads will say, well, I trust Kirby Smart the most out of everybody in this conference, I'm wondering what their identity is going to be in 2025.
Yeah, and I think we really need to put 2024 into context, because this was kind of a Murphy's Law situation for Georgia. Everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. Carson Beck forgot how to take care of the football. The wide receivers led the league, led all of college football in dropped passes. Georgia hasn't had a 1,000-yard rusher since 2019, and they didn't really establish a stable of backs last year. They faced the number one schedule in the country, and they still finished 10-2 in the regular season, won the SEC, and made the quarterfinals of the college football playoff, beating, I think, 3 playoff teams along the way. So we got to put everything in context, because for me, until Georgia does not deliver a 10-win season, I'm going to pick them to win at least 10 games. Sure. And this is a defense that, it dropped off a little bit last year. They had some inconsistent games. They gave up a lot of yards to Georgia Tech at the end of the year. They had some moments in the second half against Texas where they lost focus a little bit. But it's a defense that, when you say it dropped off, they were still only giving up 20 points a game at the end of the year when all was said and done. So it's going to be one of the most talented in the country. I think that's going to be their bread and butter. That's going to be their identity. They're going to lean on that deep and talented defense. I want to see where the pass rush comes from. I think that's going to be maybe the question I have, is how do they establish a pass rush early on? But for me, the defense is going to be the identity. And I think that I'm buying stock in this Georgia offense too. I think Gunnar Stockton, with a year of prepping to be the starter, is going to be just fine. I think that we've seen quarterbacks of his stature, and less highly touted quarterbacks, obviously, when you think back to Stetson Bennett, have done great things in this offense. And I love what they did in the wide receiver position. They did not stand pat. They did not let that problem fester and just go into the same year with the same core that could not hold on to the football last year. They went and got Noah Thomas from Texas A&M, who was the best receiver on that Texas A&M team last year. A good big body to go up and get jump balls when you need it. And Zachariah Branch, a speedster. So 2 very different guys, but are going to bring 2 different skill sets to this team. And like I said, I'm buying stock in the offense. I think that it's going to surprise some people from the word go this year and really be a nice strength of the team.
Yeah, Lance, the question that sticks out to me the most when you talk about the offensive production, without a doubt, is the rushing game. They were 102nd in rushing attack last year. I talked about the offensive line. Part of it was there was just nowhere to run the football. Didn't matter who's toting the rock. There was nowhere to go. The offensive line did not get that push. It feels like Nate Frazier is primed to have a breakout season. So do you trust the Bulldogs to get back to running the football?
Yeah, man, I might be the biggest Nate Frazier fan that you'll find. I'm a believer in him. I think that when you talk about a true freshman that was asked because of injuries last year to Georgia's running back room, ETN was banged up last year. Branson Robinson was banged up last year. The offensive line, whoever these the nerds, the big statisticians in college football that keep up with all this, Georgia was ranked like in the 90s last year in FBS and offensive line continuity throughout the year because they had so many injuries throughout the year along their offensive line. I think that all alluded to why they couldn't run the football well last year. And Nate Frazier had to carry the load a lot and led them in carries last year as a true freshman in the SEC against the number 1 ranked strength of schedule in the country, like Trey just alluded to. So he was a 5-star coming out of Powerhouse Mater Dei out of California, number 2 running back in the country. I think that this year, if the offensive line can stay healthy with a better, more consistent passing game, I think the passing game is going to be just more consistent. I don't know how explosive it's going to be or anything like that. I just think it's going to be very consistent. Like last year, again, because of like Kobe Young last year was supposed to be one of their better receivers, came out of Miami. He had, stop me if you've heard this before, he had legal issues last year and ended up not being able to play a lot of the year. And so Dylan Bell, who's a great athlete for them, fantastic athlete, very versatile, he had to play the X receiver for them last year, and he's not an X receiver. And so I think that some of their issues at receiver were also due to people missing time, either due to, injury or whatnot. Adding Noah Thomas, having Kobe Young back, your true X receivers, it's going to allow them to do what they want to do with really good athletes like Zachariah Branch and Dylan Bell, which is get them the football in space, get it to them in a hurry, and let them work. And I can promise you, Georgia fans will I know a lot of them, and just, listen to different shows and whatnot too. They complain all the time about run another bubble screen, Bobo. Run another quick screen, Bobo.
Yeah.
Like, they get tired of that. Well, if you're going to run bubble screens and if you're going to run a bunch of quick screens, being able to do it with an athlete like Dylan Bell and Zachariah Branch now, I think that's going to help them a lot. So I just think that Georgia's offense overall is going to be able to get back to doing what they want to do and run the football more because of just the overall complementary football around them.
Boy, you just took me back to freshman year when it felt like all Texas A&M did was run bubble screens and tunnel screens, crackback blocks. Like, we were doing anything other than going north-south. It was so frustrating for a time being. But you mentioned the passing game being more consistent, but maybe not necessarily super explosive. I feel like that almost might be the mantra for this Georgia Bulldogs team. Like, Nate Frazier, yes, is a freak athlete. But Gunnar Stockton, like, he doesn't, on paper, he doesn't wow me as, a Garrett Nussmeier or a DJ Lagway, a guy that's just going to take the top off the defense, week in and week out. And it could be a bubble screen, it could be a handoff, or he could be throwing a 60-yard post route. Maybe Gunner's got that in him. I don't know. I'll confess I haven't seen enough of him. I don't think really anybody outside of Athens has seen enough of him to know what to fully expect.
He threw the one really good deep ball in the Notre Dame game that Arian Smith, that I think me and you and Trey could run out and go catch it right now, that Arian Smith dropped
right through his hands.
But that's really the only deep ball that, like, we've seen him throw live in a game.
Right. But I feel like I've got this confidence that even if they're not the most explosive and leading the country in 20 or 30 plus yard plays beyond the line of scrimmage, they could be 4, 5, 6 yards in a cloud of dust and wear you down in a hurry. That's where I feel like this Georgia team gets back on top, and Kirby has found a way to go 11-3 and win the dang conference and still have doubters going, can Georgia do it? Has he lost his touch? Is this team going to lose 3 or 4 games in the regular season? That's where I feel like Kirby is playing Kristoff, and he's got everybody right where he wants him, and he's got his team ready to go out and execute in 2025. So let's close on their schedule. At Tennessee is an interesting way to open up the conference slate, followed by a bye week. Thank goodness for the Bulldogs. And then, Lance, they'll get your Crimson Tide at home. They'll play at Auburn. They get Ole Miss. They get Florida in the cocktail game. Texas comes to town November 15th. And then they've got a dangerous Georgia Tech team that took them to 10 overtimes or whatever it was last season to end the year. So as I look at this schedule, I lean towards 11-1. I feel like if Georgia does get that game against Alabama, maybe they drop to Texas. Maybe they do end up beating Texas and losing to Alabama. But I do feel like, for all the questions I had on the surface as I sat down to do this prep for their preview, I feel like Kirby gets this back. And, going 12-0 is nearly impossible in the modern era of college football. I know Oregon did it last year, but you saw how quickly it bit them in that Rose Bowl game. So I feel like they probably drop one just as the token game in a tough SEC schedule. But other than that, I feel like Georgia is right back at the top.
Yeah, I mean, this is their conference until proven otherwise, and I'm not going to pick them to lose a home game until proven otherwise. I think it's been since, 2019 that they lost a home game. So, yeah, they play Alabama and Texas this year, but they played some really good teams in that time at home as well. Only 3 true road games on this schedule last year. If you think about the road gauntlet that they faced last year, going to Texas, going to Ole Miss, to Alabama, 3 true road games, Tennessee, Auburn, and Mississippi State this year, just feels so much better, even though it's the same teams on the schedule as last year. So, yeah, 10-2 feels like the absolute floor to me, looking at this schedule, assuming nothing way out of the ordinary happens. And even if it does, everything out of the ordinary happened last year, and they still went 10-2.
Yeah, Georgia fans used to complain a lot when they were in the SEC East about, like, not having such a great home schedule and all the money they'd have to pay for season tickets and whatnot. Well, they're getting rewarded this year with their home schedule. It's fantastic. But yeah, and to your point, Mitch, earlier, I do trust Kirby Smart until proven otherwise. I think this team's going to go. I've got them 11-1. I think they're going to go 11-1 this year, and obviously be competing right there again in the thick of it for SEC championships, national championships. I think that this will be more of a Kirby Smart type team too, with the toughness and the physicality that they're going to play with on both sides of the ball.
All right. Well, there you go. You've got the Dogs back on top. I can't wait, gentlemen. I mean, talking season obviously has been here for a long time for both of our shows. I know around the rest of the country, folks are finally starting to maybe tune back into college football, but I can't wait to kick this off. I've never been in on more teams than I feel like I am this year, whether it's just the recruiting or the transfer portal, the parity, et cetera. I've got about 1,001 storylines that I'm ready to follow, and kickoff can't come soon enough. We're just obviously a couple of weeks away from it. Lance, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. For surely the minority of Jimmys and Joes that don't know who you guys are, please let them know where they can find you.
Yeah, guys, you can find us Always Talking Ball, college football podcast, Always Talking Ball on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. We're also on our socials on X and Instagram and TikTok. Guys, I really appreciate you having me on. Obviously, I have a lot of respect for you guys and what you do in your show. This was fantastic. This was a lot of fun. And I was definitely fired up when I saw the message come across that you wanted me to hop on. And then you teased it. You didn't tell me what it was. And then you said it's for the SEC preview. So, yeah, I was definitely fired up for that. But I appreciate it, fellas. It was great.
Absolutely. We will do this again very soon. We're going to have Tyler on to talk Notre Dame here in a couple episodes as well. So we'll get both sides of the show. And then, yeah, I mean, goodness, we've got, only a few weeks to savor it once the college football season actually gets here. But I know we will be doing another episode with you guys very, very shortly. Well, for Lance Barton, for Trey Reeves, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for hanging out at the SEC block party with us this week. The Big 12 is up next week. And until next week, so long, everybody.